Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking on a really critical mission.
We certainly are.
We're going deep into the realities of sex, intimacy, and desire once you pass the age of 50. And for far too long, the cultural narrative around this has just been dominated by silence or shame.
Or just this tired, ageist myth that everything sort of
Yeah.
fizzles out, thins away.
Exactly, that it just winds down.
And that myth, that is exactly what we need to confront because it's so damaging.
Right.
We've gathered some really fantastic sources today. We're pulling from clinical sexologists like Lawrence Siegel, psychotherapists like Nan Wise, and psychologists like Shannon Chavez.
So a really solid clinical foundation.
Absolutely. And our goal here is to give you a shortcut, a way to get really well informed, bypassing all the cultural hangups and just going straight to the data.
Straight to the insights that are actually useful.
Exactly. The clinical insight.
We want to unpack this thoroughly for you, but, also quickly. And we're going to start right away with what I think is a massive aha moment.
Oh, yeah.
Because the statistics we found, they completely shatter these preconceived notions.
They really do. If you just believed what you see in mainstream media, you would absolutely think this age group is, settling into celibacy.
Right. Packing it in.
But the reality is, it's stunningly different. We're drawing on these big national surveys from 2019 and 2021.
These are major studies.
Thousands of Americans over 50 talking about their sex lives. And the findings, they're not just counterintuitive, they're inspiring.
Okay, so let's start with this idea of adventurousness.
Yes.
When asked, a full 43% of Americans over 50 reported that their sex life is just as or more adventurous than it was when they were younger.
Just stop and think about that for a second. More adventure.
Almost half. It's not a small number. We're talking about almost half the population in that age group finding new ways to explore intimacy or, engaging in more adventurous sexual behaviors later in life.
And it's not just about what they're doing. It's about what they're feeling.
The internal desire.
Exactly. The 2021 survey found that 35%, so more than a third of people in this age group, claim their actual sex drive is higher now than it was in their 20s or 30s.
A higher sex drive.
Higher. So this decline that we all just assume is inevitable, it simply isn't true for a huge portion of the population.
I really wonder why that happens, though. Because you'd assume, right, that as you age, the stresses of life, career, raising kids, they start to pile up, which you'd think would suppress desire.
You would think so.
But if we're looking at people in their 50s and 60s, what external factors could possibly be contributing to more adventure and a higher drive?
Well, that's where the deep analysis comes in. And what the sources suggest is this combination of freedom and knowledge.
Okay.
So by your 50s, you often have more financial stability. That right there reduces a huge source of systemic stress.
The money worries are less acute.
Right. And critically, a lot of people are past the really intensive childcare phase. The kids are out of the house, or at least they're older.
So you get your time back, your energy, your mental space.
All of it.
Yeah.
And you pair that with this greater sense of self-knowledge and acceptance. And suddenly you've got fertile ground for exploration.
So the body might be changing, but the life circumstances, they're actually becoming more conducive to relaxation and focusing on pleasure.
Exactly. It's like the pressure valve has been released.
And all that curiosity and drive that was maybe buried under diapers and deadlines, it can resurface.
And potentially stronger than before, which is precisely why we have to establish this foundational concept for our whole deep dives today. It comes from the clinical sexologist, Lawrence Siegel. And he makes this really crucial distinction that it frames everything else we're going to talk about.
And what's that?
He says that while changes in sexual feeling and function as we age are absolutely normal, that's just biology. Problems are not.
Okay, say that again. Changes are normal, but problems are not.
Exactly. But we assume they are. We assume the changes are the problems.
That feels like a huge philosophical shift. So when someone notices, they need a little more time to get aroused, or the same old trips aren't working, they immediately jump to, I have a problem, my sex life is over.
Yes, and Siegel is saying, no, you just have a change. You just need to adjust the maintenance routine.
Like with a car.
It's a perfect analogy. The human body is magnificent, but it requires different maintenance at different stages. He points out, you wouldn't expect a 55-year-old marathon runner to have the same spontaneous speed they had at 25.
Of course not. They'd have to train differently, eat differently.
Right. You have to establish new norms.
So the failure isn't in the body. It's in the expectation.
That's it. You're setting yourself up for disappointment if you expect your body at 55 to perform exactly like it did at 25. And that disappointment is what translates into this feeling of having a problem.
So what's the big takeaway from that?
It's this. When we are younger, sexual function is often automatic. It's like a default setting.
You don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. But as we get older, maintaining a satisfying sex life requires more effort and awareness.
Effort and awareness.
And that awareness, it moves intimacy from being this passive experience to a very intentional, conscious act. And that intentionality, that's the engine for the satisfaction we see in that 43% who say their sex lives are more adventurous now.
That makes our task today really clear, then. We need to identify those normal changes and then outline the specific efforts and the kind of awareness required to keep that engine humming.
Yep.
So let's start with what might be the single most powerful impediment, and it's not physical at all.
Yeah.
It's that invisible barrier, mindset, and cultural stigma. So moving into our first section, we have to tackle the mind. Because according to all the experts, it's the brain and the culture around it that create the most formidable obstacle.
It really is. And the psychotherapist and sex therapist Nan Wise is crystal clear on this.
What does she say?
She states that negative beliefs about sexuality and aging are a much bigger problem than most people realize.
A bigger problem. I mean, that's a bold statement.
It is. And she doesn't just mean feeling a bit down about it. These beliefs are toxic. They act as these internal blocks that prevent us from adapting to what are just normal changes.
So why does she think the cultural and psychological stigma is a bigger problem than, say, a real hormonal decline?
Because the culture takes those natural, slight hormonal adjustments and it magnifies them. It blows them up into a catastrophic failure.
How so?
Society insists, usually implicitly, through movies or just a lack of representation, that people in their 50s and beyond are less sexual due to their age. That your desire is supposed to just subside.
And if you start to believe that story,
you internalize that message that your time is over, your era of desirability or passion is done. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow. So if I believe the story that I'm supposed to be less interested, then my brain will actively suppress the actual signals of desire and arousal because it's trying to comply with the cultural script.
You've got it. It's almost like the culture is gaslighting us into believing we have a problem when all we have is a change.
That is an excellent way to put it.
And you have to remember, the brain is the body's most complex sexual organ. So if it's preoccupied with shame or self-criticism or this fear of failure,
it's not focused on pleasure.
It can't be. It's diverting all its resources away from the rest and digest system that you need for arousal. It keeps us locked in that stressful, performance-driven mindset.
But this is where the flip side comes in, the positive side of all that life experience. And this is actually really exciting because it gives us the counter-narrative we need.
It does.
The psychologist Shannon Chavez, her findings suggest that many people in this age group actually have better sex.
They absolutely do. And this is where the payoff for decades of just living life becomes so apparent. Chavez attributes this increased satisfaction directly to greater clarity and confidence.
So they're not just having sex, they're having informed sex.
Beautifully put. Informed sex.
Let's elaborate on that clarity. What exactly have people gotten clearer on by the time they reach their 50s?
They are clearer on what they want, what feels good, and, this is crucial, how to express those desires without shame or embarrassment. Think back to when you were younger. You might prioritize what you think your partner wants, or you might endure something uncomfortable because you're afraid of seeming inexperienced or too demanding.
Right, you don't want to rock the boat.
By the time you reach your 50s, you've typically shed a lot of those hang-ups. You know your body's map intimately.
So it sounds like the sexual ego kind of softens and your ability to advocate for yourself gets stronger.
That's a great way to look at it.
You move from this anxiety-ridden chase for what other people define as good sex to a more confident pursuit of what you define as pleasurable and intimate.
That is the core difference right there. Chavez notes that sex in this age group is often described as more connected
Why?
because it's no longer about proving something. There's significantly less performance anxiety.
Ah.
People are more grounded, they're more comfortable in their own skin, and so therefore they are more confident and assertive with their partners. They can communicate their needs and their boundaries way more effectively.
I think that connection piece is just, it's huge. When you stop worrying about all those external metrics, like how long it lasts or whether you look perfect,
Yeah.
you're suddenly free to just focus entirely on the quality of the connection with your partner and on the sensation itself.
And that shared focus on sensation over destination
Mm-hmm.
that naturally deepens intimacy. So
Mm.
this upside, this experience-driven upside, it directly fights back against that cultural stigma.
So by adopting this new mindset, by leveraging your life experience,
You've completed the first and most critical step towards satisfaction.
Hmm.
Regardless of whatever physical adjustments might come down the road, the first hurdle is always, always psychological.
That's a really powerful foundation to build on. We've established that intentionality and mindset are paramount. So now let's apply that focus and that awareness to the specific common physiological shifts.
Let's do it.
We're moving into section 2, and we'll start with challenges that are often faced by women, particularly around menopause. Okay, so the reality of aging means navigating these hormonal shifts, and for women, the drop in estrogen that's associated with menopause. It's a central factor.
It is.
And this often leads to this issue of vaginal dryness.
Yes, and this is just a classic example of a normal change that if you ignore it or misinterpret it, it quickly becomes a problem that can really impact a relationship.
And the statistic here is pretty substantial.
It is. It's estimated that about half of postmenopausal women deal with vaginal dryness.
Half. Okay, so that is way too common to be considered some niche issue.
Not at all. It's a massive expected demographic shift.
And the unfortunate consequence, of course, is that dryness can cause friction. It can lead to painful or just uncomfortable sexual experiences.
Which naturally impacts overall sexual functioning and, critically, your desire to even attempt intimacy in the first place.
Of course. If something hurts, you stop wanting to do it.
Exactly. When sex becomes associated with discomfort or pain, the brain builds an avoidance mechanism. And then you're in this vicious cycle.
A vicious cycle.
Discomfort leads to avoidance. Avoidance reinforces the belief that sex is no longer possible or that it's a chore.
Which then increases that whole sense of decline.
You got it. The key is intervention and awareness. You have to break the cycle.
And this is where we need those practical, simple solutions. Lauren Siegel offers 3 that are really actionable. So solution number 1 addresses the physiological gap directly. External aid.
Yes. And Siegel's recommendation on this is forceful and it's straightforward. He says all women over 50 should have a high-quality personal lubricant on hand.
He doesn't frame that as a solution to a failure, though.
No, not at all. He frames it as necessary maintenance. We need to normalize using lubrication, just like we normalize using moisturizer for dry skin or eye drops for dry eyes. It's the same thing.
I think that resistance to lube often comes from that internalized idea, that sex should be spontaneously perfect, like in the movies.
Right.
But what the sources are basically telling us is that ship has sailed, and that's okay. Use the tool that makes the experience better.
Absolutely. It's about optimizing pleasure, not admitting defeat. Which brings us to solution 2, which moves beyond external aid and focuses on optimizing your internal arousal.
And that means spending more time on foreplay.
Precisely. The older we get, the less quickly the arousal response tends to kick in and build up.
It's not instantaneous anymore.
No. So the advice is to spend more time on foreplay, on sensual touch. The goal is to reach a level of arousal that naturally increases your internal lubrication.
Which reinforces Siegel's central principle again. More effort and more awareness.
Exactly. You can't rush the process. You need to devote intentional time to building that desire.
That's a wonderful reframing because it shifts the focus away from just, getting the job done,
Yeah.
and it moves it toward prolonged pleasure and mutual exploration. More foreplay isn't a duty, it's an opportunity for more sensuality.
And it connects right back to that clarity we talked about earlier. Older couples often communicate better. They feel more comfortable slowing down.
Because they know that a rushed experience is probably going to be less satisfying.
Yes. So they assert the need to take their time.
Okay, and finally, solution number 3. This one addresses the situation where penetration might remain uncomfortable even with aids.
Right. And this requires reframing the very definition of what sex is.
Okay.
The clinical advice here is simple, but it's profound. If P&V intercourse is persistently uncomfortable or painful, shift the focus entirely.
So what does that look like?
Alternative activities like oral sex, mutual masturbation, using sex toys. These should be embraced as equally valid and potentially more enjoyable expressions of intimacy.
That's critical because it eliminates the pressure on one specific mechanism having to work perfectly.
Yes, if the goal is shared pleasure and connection, then the specific method you use is irrelevant.
It opens up a whole new toolbox for intimacy that might have been overlooked when you were younger.
Indeed, it's a mature recognition that pleasure is diverse. And before we move on, we have to mention the silver lining that Siegel points out about menopause itself.
There's a silver lining.
For many, yes.
Mm.
While the physical adjustments require effort, a lot of women go through menopause without serious issues. And for many of them, that end of worrying about pregnancy, that sense of liberation,
Oh, I can imagine.
it can be a powerful catalyst for increased spontaneity and desire. A huge weight is lifted.
We've established that intentionality is really the key for managing those female physiological shifts. Now we need to transition into section 3 and focus on male concerns and the massive shatter that is cast by performance pressure.
Yes. And just like with the female experience, the male body undergoes expected shifts that require a total recalibration of expectations.
And the biggest mistake men make is assuming these shifts mean it's the end of the road.
Exactly, when they merely signal that you need a new playbook.
So what are those expected normal shifts that Lawrence Siegel outlines? What are the points that define this new normal?
Well, there are 3 main areas of change. First, erections will not be as spontaneous or reflexive as they used to be.
Okay.
That nearly instant, effortless readiness that was maybe triggered by minimal stimulation that requires more time and more direct input now.
So that youthful state of just constant potential readiness starts to fade.
It does.
Exactly.
Second, men may need more and varied stimulation. Not just more time, but different kinds of input to both achieve and, crucially, to maintain an erection. What worked automatically for 20 years might now require a more concerted, multisensory approach.
So the body is almost asking for more engagement, more partnership, rather than just being an independent actor.
That is a perfect way to put it. And the third normal shift is that erections may be less hard or robust than they were when younger.
And why is that?
It's just due to a natural decrease in elasticity and vascular efficiency over time.
Yeah.
So these 3 points, together, that is the new normal. Experiencing these things is just aging. It's not a disease.
Now, we absolutely must draw the distinction here with erectile dysfunction, or ED.
Yes.
Because while having an occasional miss is normal, being consistently unable to develop or sustain an erection, most times you attempt sex. That suggests true ED.
And this is the vital health note. We cannot stress this enough. The sources strongly advise speaking with a doctor immediately if this is a persistent issue.
Why immediately?
Because ED is often not just a sexual problem. It can be an early warning sign of a very serious underlying health condition. Most commonly, cardiovascular issues.
Okay, that connection between ED and heart health is profound. I think we need to explain that further. How does a problem in the bedroom signal a problem in the heart?
It all comes down to blood flow.
Right.
Achieving and maintaining an erection requires robust, unimpeded blood flow. Now, the arteries that feed the penis are much smaller than the arteries leading to the heart.
Okay, I see where this is going.
If those smaller penile arteries start showing signs of hardening or blockage atherosclerosis, it often means a similar, more dangerous blockage is already starting to occur in the larger coronary arteries.
So if ED can be a crucial, non-invasive early indicator that you need to check your broader vascular health.
A canary in the coal mine, so to speak.
Yeah.
Addressing ED isn't just about restoring function. It's potentially life-saving preventative medicine.
That changes the entire conversation. It moves it from a source of shame to a prompt for necessary medical intervention.
It does, which is why normalizing that conversation with a physician is so important.
And beyond erections, Siegel also details expected changes with ejaculation.
Yes, he notes that the volume of ejaculate and the force with which it's released may be significantly less. Again, an expected shift. It just requires a slight adjustment of expectations around that intensity.
But once these physiological shifts start to happen, the primary enemy, according to Nan Wise, is the trap of performance anxiety.
This is where the cultural scripting really does its damage.
Wise's argument here is so insightful because it connects gender norms directly to sexual function.
It does.
She argues that men are socialized to believe their sexual vitality, their competence, hinges on the unfailingly consistent performance of their penises.
And she calls that a recipe for problems.
I can see why. It's a ridiculous, stressful standard.
It forces men into this high-stakes, single-point assessment. Did it work? Is it hard enough? And the minute man starts watching his penis, assessing its rigidity during lovemaking,
The nervous system shifts.
it shifts right out of restorative pleasure and into performance review. And what happens when you're under stress? The body clamps down.
And Wise points out this isn't even unique to older men, right?
Not at all. Even young men experience temporary ED when they're preoccupied with performance anxiety. The focus on the outcome, the erection, actively works against the desired outcome.
That's the great irony. The psychological pressure becomes the mechanism of failure, regardless of age or hormonal health.
Which means the ultimate solution has to be psychological and philosophical. And this brings us to what Siegel says is his most important advice for aging men.
And what's that?
Relieve the performance pressure and radically change the objective of sex.
How do we actually do that? It sounds great in theory, but what does it look like in practice?
It looks like shifting from goal-oriented sex to process-oriented sex. Siegel advises approaching any sexual encounter with the sole idea of simply wanting to share a pleasurable, intimate experience.
So the mission becomes connection and sensation, not achieving a specific high-stakes metric.
Exactly. So if the erection isn't as hard as it used to be, or if it falters, it doesn't matter, because that wasn't the mission in the first place. The mission was to touch, to connect, to enjoy each other.
You're redefining what success looks like.
Completely. He encourages people to look at orgasm less as the goal, the finish line that validates the whole thing, and more as a nice side effect of sharing pleasure.
A nice side effect. I like that.
It takes immense pressure off the penis as the sole determinant of success. It opens up the entire body and the relationship itself as the landscape for eroticism.
That reframing is truly liberating. It allows couples to focus on sensuality, on prolonged touch, on all these activities that don't rely on penetration, which can result in far more frequent and less stressful intimate moments.
It is the intentional shift that transforms the entire experience.
Our final section, Section 4, this addresses an issue that really crosses all gender lines: the decline in sexual desire or libido, and the critical role stress management plays in reigniting that spark.
Yes, and lower sexual desire is a complex challenge because it's usually multifactorial.
It's not just one thing.
No, it can be rooted in stress, underlying physical health problems, mental health issues like depression, side effects from medications you need to take, and of course the declining hormone levels that come with aging.
The psychologist Shannon Chavez, she specifically highlights how these hormonal shifts impact energy and mood, which then directly affects libido.
That's right. She notes that the changes from menopause or andropause don't just affect physiology, they also bring on this systemic fatigue, mood swings, just a general feeling of malaise.
So you just feel less energetic, and therefore you feel less interested in sex.
It's a cyclical issue. If you feel physically and emotionally drained, your bandwidth for intimacy just shrinks dramatically.
So because of this physiological element, the first proactive step the sources recommend is a medical one.
Yes, getting a hormone panel.
That makes sense. You can't fix what you haven't measured.
Yeah.
What does a hormone panel actually reveal? What should a listener be looking for?
It essentially gives you a roadmap. It shows you where key hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone might be declining and contributing to those unwanted symptoms.
And the good news from Chavez is that these things are manageable.
Very manageable. She says most hormonal changes are very manageable with the right support.
So let's elaborate on those support options. For some people, hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, is discussed. What's the general thinking there, without giving specific medical advice, of course?
Of course. So HRT involves supplementing those declining hormones to reduce symptoms like hot flashes, fatigue, low libido. It can be highly effective.
But it's not for everyone.
No, it requires a very careful consultation with a doctor to weigh the benefits against any potential risks, making sure it's tailored to your individual health profile. But it is a proactive, medically supported method for managing these physical changes.
And for those who are seeking alternative paths, what do the sources suggest about more naturalistic methods?
The emphasis there shifts to lifestyle optimization. So, targeted nutritional supplements, focused stress reduction practices like yoga and meditation, and specific exercise routines designed to maintain energy and cardiovascular health.
So these methods are more about supporting the body's own systems.
Exactly. They aim to support the body's inherent ability to balance itself and cope with the hormonal shifts, and they can often achieve significant symptom reduction without pharmaceuticals. It gives you options, from clinical to lifestyle-focused.
Those are manageable steps for the physiological side. But Nan Wise makes this compelling case that the most pervasive libido killer, regardless of your hormones, is just relentless, unmanaged stress.
Her argument is that modern life traps most of us in the fight-or-flight state.
The sympathetic nervous system.
Right. It's meant for emergencies. But when we're constantly stressed, traffic, deadlines, financial worries, we're perpetually pumping out stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline.
So if you're constantly in survival mode, your body is convinced there's a tiger lurking behind every corner.
Precisely. And why it says this perpetual state erodes our sense of well-being and systematically puts a kibosh on our sex drives.
Why?
Because intimacy and pleasure require vulnerability and relaxation. The absolute opposite of fight or flight. You simply cannot relax and feel desire when your whole system is primed for danger.
So the goal isn't just to manage stress, it's to intentionally shift the body into the parasympathetic or the restorative state. How do we deliberately make that shift?
The practical technique Wise recommends is daily intentional breathing exercises. This is an immediate biological hack for relaxation that anyone can implement, and the science behind it is just fascinating.
Okay, walk us through the technique. We need the details that make it actionable for someone listening right now.
Okay, the commitment is small. 5 minutes, once or twice a day, in a quiet spot. And she outlines 4 critical steps.
Step 1 is just the physical setup. Find your quiet spot to sit.
Right. Step 2 is the mental prerequisite. She calls it radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
This is the psychological lever. The instruction is to give yourself permission to be exactly as you are, and for the moment to be exactly as it is.
That concept, it sounds deeply therapeutic. Why is that necessary before you even start the breathing?
Because so much of our chronic stress comes from resisting what is. We're angry about the traffic, we're worried about the future, frustrated by a mistake we made yesterday.
Right, we're fighting reality.
By accepting the current reality, just for 5 minutes, you disengage from that mental struggle. Wise says this loosens and softens a whole lot of the stress we accumulate when we resist what is. You're letting go of resistance, which is inherently relaxing.
Okay, so with the mind ready, we move to the actual physical breathing. Step 3, the inhalation.
You take a long, smooth inhalation through the nose. The focus here is on smoothness, not on maximum volume. You're just filling the body gently.
At step 4, this is the biological trigger that activates that restorative state.
You take a long, soft exhalation either through the nose or mouth. that is distinctly longer than your inhalation. This is the key. The exhale has to feel soft and relaxed.
Let's dig into the science here. Why does making the exhale longer trigger this shift? This is the core of it.
This specific breathing pattern directly stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve, and it acts like the main highway of the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest state.
So it's like a switch.
It is. When the exhalation is prolonged and gentle, it physically slows your heart rate and sends a direct signal to your brain that you are safe. This systematically decreases the circulating stress hormones, effectively turning down the volume on fight or flight.
So those 5 minutes aren't just a mental exercise. You are physically resetting your nervous system. That is an incredible tool for your overall well-being and, as a side benefit, for desire.
It is. And WISE encourages listeners, don't just wait for that quiet moment. Use stress cropping up during the day, that tension in traffic, anxiety before a meeting. Use that as your cue.
A trigger to practice.
A trigger to just pause
Yeah.
and intentionally slow your breathing. This simple habit enhances your overall well-being and helps you tune into your lust for life, both in and out of the bedroom.
So stress management is desire management.
Plain and simple.
This has been a tremendously insightful deep dive. We've moved from cultural stigma all the way to actionable physiological and psychological strategies. Let's bring it all back home with the essential takeaways for you.
I think we fundamentally achieved our mission. We debunked the myth. The data confirms it. Sex after 50.
Right. Second, address the physiological shifts with intention. For women, this means normalizing the use of external aids like lube, prioritizing extended foreplay, and remembering that sex can and should be reframed to include any activity that brings pleasure.
Third, for men, the shift has to be philosophical. Change the goal of sex from performance to shared pleasure. Relieve that pressure cooker. See orgasm as that nice side effect of connection, not the only metric of success.
And critically, treat ED as a potential signpost for serious cardiovascular health, which means prompting an immediate medical consultation.
And finally, fight the pervasive modern disease of chronic stress. Manage your hormones proactively, yes, but most powerfully. Use that intentional breathing, lengthening the soft exhale to stimulate the vagus nerve, to routinely shift your nervous system into the restorative state that's required for genuine intimacy and desire.
It really sounds like the secret to great sex after 50 isn't trying to recapture youth, but rather embracing profound self-awareness, deep communication, and prioritizing pleasure above all else.
It's about intentionality in every area of your life. And as we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought from Nan Wise that just ties all these threads together.
Okay.
She challenges the societal notion that pleasure is some kind of luxury, she says. Pleasure isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for a healthy mind and body and a life worth living.
That's a powerful place to end, a necessity. So if you, listening right now, truly start treating pleasure, whether it's the pleasure of a quiet breath, a good conversation, or intimacy, not as a reward you earn, but as a fundamental, non-negotiable requirement for your physical and mental health. How does that recognition fundamentally change your approach to self-care, to your relationships, and to your well-being this week?
That's the space to explore. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
See you next time.